like to thank you for allowing me into your homes for this 28th episode of Season 4 of Esoteric Science Roundtable. And I do want to start with a couple of brief announcements before I get into the show proper. I would like to first begin by thanking all the folks that took the time and trouble to come out to the metaphysical and philosophical meetings that we here at Esoteric Science Roundtable and the fine folks over at Therefore I Am, Christy Course and crew co-host each and every third Wednesday. And last night's meeting was quite a good meeting in my estimation. We had a good crowd and a lot of good conversation. And also some folks, to me it's always a good thing when the fellow Access host can break bread with one another and share and exchange. And this offered another instance of that taking place, and I want to thank Freeman from the Freeman perspective for coming down and sharing his time and his insights with the folks in the meeting as well. And some may be familiar with Freeman's work. He has a television show that's relatively new to Access that, and it may be also because of the time. It's on at midnight on Sundays, so Sunday night at midnight on Channel 16. And you can catch the Freeman perspective, and he's done a great job with using a lot of imagery related to symbols and things of that nature to really tie these things together where they just rapid fire, hit your consciousness and really have a profound effect. And so I think he's doing a lot of great work, and again, I want to thank him for coming down and just again allowing us to exchange and cooperate with one another, which I think Access, that is the spirit of Access Television, and when we actually apply it and have that active, then to me that's always a great thing. And so definitely want to thank Freeman and mention that quickly. Also, I want to thank Jimmy Gardner for, on the forums for the Jack Blood radio program, he took the time to mention the meetings and invite folks down, and sure enough, several folks from the Jack Blood forum did make their way down to our meeting, in addition to Jack Blood himself, which was a very nice opportunity to chat with Jack and to break bread with him on another level as well, on a more casual level. And so Jack will be coming on in the future as well as a guest, and so I look forward to that. Some may be familiar with the Genesis radio network that Alex Jones is also a part of, and we're fortunate enough in this city to have Jack Blood as well following Alex. And so again, I want to thank Jack for coming out to the meeting and supporting our efforts as well, and again, just sharing and breaking bread. So that's something that folks have to look forward to in the near future, is an appearance on this show by Jack Blood also. And so let's see, I think that's going to do it for the announcements for the most part. And there is one other thing I want to get into before the show, which is related to something that is definitely very near and dear to us here at this show, and also the folks over at Therefore I Am, and that's related to the chemtrails that many people might be familiar with, that they see in the skies, basically the thick white trails that are being left behind that tend to stay and stick and intersect, and then other aspects kick in and they do other strange things. But a lot of people are familiar with this program. But I want to mention, and a lot of people have backed me up on this as of late, within the past, let's say, week to 9 days, I have not seen one single chem plane spraying over the areas that I've been frequenting lately, and I normally see them, a lot. A lot of times I'll just think about a chem plane or a chemtrail, and I'll look up and I'll see a chem plane going by spraying just like clockwork. So I think that is interesting to note that the activity has really, really subsided, to say the least. And if anybody has seen some chemtrails as of late, if they want to call in later and touch base about that, I'd be happy to take some calls relating to that. But this reminds me of the last time that there was a noticed or marked decline in chemtrail activity, and that was right before the Second Gulf War. So I don't know if this is an indication that these pilots are being assigned to other duties and they're going to be more useful in some kind of a combat scenario, and so therefore they're being sent over to the Middle East or something, because there was some talk that June of this year would be the month or the time in which we were going to have some aggression against Iran, that I've heard through some various talk radio formats and various other little chatter that you tend to hear. And so if this is a similar situation to that, then perhaps this might be an explanation for the reduction in the number of the chemtrails that have been around lately, that they may be having to lend their piloting skills to other endeavors. And actually, my hope is that that's not the case. I really would rather almost them spray us with bug spray on a daily basis than go over and kill a bunch of innocent women and children in a foreign land in our good name for the behalf of our free country. So that is something to consider. Again, I hope that's not an obvious indication that we're going to be in some impending aggressive situation upcoming. So again, hopefully that is not the case, but it's, and that's a sad thing when when I get a little nervous, I guess, when I don't see chem planes just filtering through the sky and just, running amok as they normally do. And so, again, that's the fact that am even concerned along those lines that I'm not seeing them. That's not too good in my estimation. But I have enjoyed seeing the big, fluffy cotton ball type clouds that I remember from when I was much younger, when things were a bit more normal, if I can use that term, when we were in a gentler and more innocent age, I suppose. But nonetheless, I wanted to bring that up, and maybe other folks have noticed that as well, that the chemtrail activity has been on the down low somewhat, and just if other people might have been contemplating along those lines as to why that is, if they've noticed the reduction as I have. Okay, so I do want to go ahead and jump into the show proper for this evening, and the show is called Progress, and the main angle that I want to come from in this presentation is the idea of the progress, in particular, of the human race. All life is in the process of an evolutionary unfolding, and we can see evidence of that in all the kingdoms of nature, but we, as self-conscious humanity, are making very, again, marked inroads as far as definite benchmarks in consciousness that we can look to and look back into our history as well and see where we've come from and see incidents that we can point to specifically that would give us an indicator of progress in some respects, or maybe a little bit like looking at a report card in a certain sense as far as how we've been able to make the grade, so to speak, throughout time. Again, there are varying benchmarks or aspects of our human unfolding that we can look at throughout history and demonstrate the progress that we've made from the more ancient, from our more ancient days. But nonetheless, we can do some things to look at certain unfoldings and certain incidents and, again, see them as a benchmark indicator of the unfolding of our humanity. And the one key indicator that we can consider is in the context of light. Light, certainly in the physical plane context, in the sense of light that we're familiar with through electricity, and all the various lights that have become more prominent all over the globe in recent times, in the last 100 years, really. And so that is a relatively short amount of time in the context of our human history that we've had access to the electric torch or electric light. And that's become more, again, more prevalent and more prominent in our day and age. And so this is one definite benchmark we can consider, but we can also follow back to the ideas of first discovering fire, and that means to light things and to dispel darkness to a certain degree, and to gain a greater control over our environment, and to take on the means by which we can apprehend and understand our situation, to give us more clarity. And so this is where there are double meanings, obviously, with the word light, in that, yes, there is the physical plane light, that, like a lamp in a room, that would light the room and allow us to see and allow us to read and allow us to do more things than we would otherwise be able to do if we had to depend strictly on just the day and the night and just the light that was available by virtue of the sun. And so we can see humanity, the unfoldment through humanity, as we've reached out and we've grasped these concepts or these inventions or these ideas that have allowed us to expand our consciousness and allow us to expand our area of understanding, our sphere of influence, and to just improve our lot overall. And so that's certainly probably the initial great discovery that we can consider in the context of this light and this unfolding of light in the respect of our consciousness. And then later through time, and I'm probably skipping some very important discoveries within light, but if we just flash forward somewhat, even, well, quite a bit actually, to more recent times, to the first uses of the microscope and the first uses of the telescope, wherein we took light to another level, in a sense, in that we were able to use light and construct a device because we had advanced and evolved as humanity, and so we're able to construct machines to allow us to use light in a more proficient manner. And so we're able to expand our understanding, expand our awareness through, again, another instance of harnessing light and using light in this context. And so as we're able to use light in a potent fashion to look into the microscope, we see an entirely different world open up before us that we had really no clue of before. And so we're able to ascertain and understand, again, something that, for all intents and purposes, laid, it was non-existent for our senses and our understanding because we could not perceive it. We had no device or no real means to apprehend or ascertain at that small level. And so again, as our consciousness unfolded, light did its work and able to raise our awareness enough to be able to build the device in the first place, and also the drive, the evolutionary urge to seek into a further realm of understanding, to seek past the dense physical. And so these inner urges are part of a light impulse, an enlightenment process, or an unfolding, or an awareness, a consciousness expansion situation. And so again, light is demonstrating itself in this twofold way always. As light reflects itself through our consciousness, and we're able to focus on that light and uplift it and use it in a potent fashion, we also, in that way, are using our body as a tool, just in the same way that we would devise, let's say, the microscope or the telescope. We are building into our physical vehicle the means by which we can more potently use light. And when I speak of light in that context, that is more so the spiritual light, which is more of an energetic quality based on love, ultimately, more so than some dense physical aspect of our nature that we can get a better feel for by using one of these tools and getting a greater glimpse into the workings of. So we also have the ideas on the opposite end of the telescope. This takes us far outside of this, obviously in the opposite direction of this very microscopic miniature world that we were unaware of, that basically was non-existent, going on beneath our very eyes. This takes us out past to greater expanses that, for all intents and purposes, we were practically not aware of as well. Even though we could perceive of these dim lights in the sky, and bright lights in some cases as well, but nonetheless, the fact that we're able to, through building a device, we are able to tap into a greater aspect of understanding. We're able to put ourselves into the context of a greater whole. And that's another idea of expansion. As we expand our consciousness, we're constantly becoming more inclusive. And so these two devices were very instrumental in that respect. The microscope allowing us to be inclusive of the much lesser levels of our creation, and then the telescope allowing us to be much more cognizant and expansive and inclusive towards what is away from the planet, but yet is still intimately connected with our planet. And so these ties began to be more considered as well. And so the microscopic in the context of man and its relation to man was considered. And so scientific discoveries were built up from there. And then we got, like, say, penicillin, and we decided how to use these microscopic entities and these workings out to our advantage at certain levels. And then conversely, we do the same with expanding our consciousness out into the greater expanses of space, in that we're able to bring that knowledge back in to our area of endeavors for greater unfolding. And I guess one kind of correlation, but not a direct relation, would be, since we did finally make our way into space, a lot of things that are developed for the space program and to ultimately end up being reapplied or adjusted for use in everyday life for us here on the planet. And so again, this is kind of a correlation, if you will, of this idea of expansion of light that allows for expansion of awareness, that allows for uplifting of humanity at some level. And so science certainly demonstrates that and brings that into our consideration. Another aspect of that that would be a very big benchmark would be the light bulb. And when we did, again, get the electric torch or electric light into households around the world. And just by looking at the globe itself, if we were to look from space at the globe and we were to look a couple of hundred years ago, relatively speaking, especially, whichever portion of the globe would happen to be dark at that time, if we were to glance at that and observe and assess it, we would see that it was relatively dark, all things considered. But then, coming forward 100 years or so and getting into when electricity was more widespread, and then electric light became much more prominent and prolific along the planet, through the planet, among men, that we were able to, again, have another benchmark indicator of an expansion of consciousness that allowed for another expansion past that of a physical plane apparatus that, again, correlates to our advancement, our evolution. And so as we have physical plane light, this greatly advanced our abilities to do so much more as far as, on the one hand, it allowed for a greater enslavement because it allowed people to work 24 hours a day and for things to operate 24 hours a day, so factories and things of that nature could run, in essence, 24/7. So, yes, there are aspects of this that could be pointed at in the terms of enslaving us as well, but the whole dance and the whole traveling into dense material plane existence to begin with is part of the evolutionary process. And so for us to get into these situations, it's just another component of our evolutionary process that we had to get into this dense physical nature in order to experience and to gain the insights through, again, revelation, through light. And again, these discoveries just being an example of that evolutionary process of man becoming more lighted and becoming more enlightened as time progresses. And so again, the light bulb was one example of that. There are certainly other components to that too that we can consider that tie into expansion of consciousness, and the expansion of consciousness versus the inertia of the material plane and how they're in a battle. And there's the polarities and the duality are playing off against each other. So getting back to the electric light and Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison was obviously a great inventor and could be thanked for his contributions to humanity, certainly as far as my estimation, the light bulb and the phonograph. And I might put the phonograph before the light bulb personally, but at any rate, here you had an individual that was making these great discoveries, and he also, in his own endeavors, was looking towards enlightenment. And so Thomas Edison joined the so-called Theosophical Society, the much maligned Theosophical Society started by Helena Blavatsky back in 1875. And so here he was trying to, on the one hand, enlighten himself and offer these inventions to humanity. But there is a famous instance in which Nikola Tesla did a project for Edison, and then upon completion of the project, Tesla had asked Edison, for this payment, and Edison was like, "Well, you don't understand our American idea of a joke," basically just saying, "I'm not going to pay you," in essence. And this also is a very real component of why we don't have the so-called free energy more prevalent in our homes and in society in this day and age. I think that's ultimately right and proper for the times, that we still need this dense material nature to express ourselves through and to learn our lessons through. And so that the early endeavors of Tesla were a bit premature in the context of the greater unfolding. Humanity, I feel, was ultimately not ready for those great gifts, and so we still had to travel a while and stay a while in the dense material and still stay in the dark, if you will, about certain things and about certain opportunities and about the nature of creative energies that are making themselves more manifest. So this is also another aspect of consciousness and expansion of ideas that filters its way into our human thinking. And certainly scientific ideas are part of that, and social reform, governmental ideas of government, religious reform, financial reform, all of these components of our human endeavor, as they continually refine themselves, are part of this progress that we're going through as humanity. And they're also indicators or demonstrators of again, this light unfolding through humanity. We can look at all of the discoveries throughout history and all of the evolution throughout history as a series of unfoldings of light, as a series of expansions of awareness throughout humanity from the beginnings of time. And so this has worked its way through our humanity from our earliest times. This being the case, there's always going to be a hierarchical fashioning or patterning to our human evolution and unfoldment. And so by virtue of that, there are always going to be, from the earliest times, those that set themselves up in more of a leadership role and those that set themselves up in more of a service role. And this, again, is part and parcel of our evolutionary process, and it's what we've chosen. It's the roles that we've come into manifestation and accepted. And so these natural outcroppings of this can be traced as well, and we can see further expansions of light throughout humanity. And so if we can look back to these earliest times, to past the point when the earlier humans found fire and became more proficient with fire, and then certain segments would become more separated from other segments and set themselves apart as more of a priest class and more of a leadership role, and then those that were more of the following role. And this gradually unfolded throughout humanity. Now, considering that there is a spiritual impulse that finds its way into manifestation that qualifies and colors and characterizes all of these unfoldings behind humanity and behind our evolutionary unfolding, that there is a spiritual impulse behind this. And so by virtue of this, we can trace back to the spiritual origins all of these tributaries that have found themselves branching out into society. And these various tributaries are, again, all along all areas of human endeavor, whether that be scientific, whether that be in the religious, whether that be in the educational system. But even considering in the scientific community, there is a hierarchical structure. There is the peer-reviewed structure that's set up in which there are those that are going to be atop the hierarchical, the hierarchical unfolding, the hierarchical component of science as well. And so you'll see those at the top being the top scientists, or those that are the heads of universities, or those that are the heads of the journals, that are the peer-reviewed journals, that are, in essence, the gatekeepers and the arbiters of what filters down into the greater aspect of our unfolding along these lines of approach. And so very much with science, we have this unfolding in this respect. And so scientific discoveries make their way from the scientist ultimately to humanity by virtue of discoveries and inventions and just applications of science to practical everyday life and use. And so we can see how this does work its way into our humanity and filter down. And so that's just one component of it, but nonetheless there is this aspect of it that, again, it does filter down, and that there is an origin point, and again, from all the common tributaries in manifestation, there is that originating spiritual point. So again, we can use that in science. We can use that in religion as well. Within religion, there's and probably the easiest example would be, well, one of the easier examples would be through the Catholic Church. That at the very top of this, you have the papacy. You have the Pope as the emissary to the highest spiritual component, and then you have the remainder within the greater context of the pyramid as those that are the worshipers and those that fill in all the other worker components within the, again, the context of this hierarchical structure. And so everything in nature follows this pattern and works its way into manifestation through these means. And so as these things play out, and it's a two-way street as well. There's an invocation and evocation, in which, as from the top things are being impressed to the bottom, there's also, from the very base aspect, there's an evocative aspect. There's a calling out. There's a crying forth. There's an expression of want and need that is applied for or requested. And so energy is drawn down, as well as the energy that's forced down on its own. And so there's this meeting, there's this constant flux of energy from these highest points to, again, the greater aspect. And this filters out and ultimately reflects itself, again, through the scientific thread of discovery that we can trace back into antiquity, through the different rises of various cultures and civilizations throughout time, that we can see, okay, this great age rose up, it had its zenith, and then it began to subside, and then other lesser kingdoms began to rise and subside. And so this is a component of humanity that's impressed behind the scenes in a spiritual fashion at the highest levels. Now, there are also those within every aspect of human endeavor that are going to be custodians of the spiritual aspects of the plan in a fashion that the average person will not be able to ascertain and apprehend. And so there are going to be those that are going to be closest to the causative spiritual point of these endeavors that are going to be able to be the best interpreters. They're going to be able to have the awareness, the capacity, the understanding to interpret from these high spiritual impulses something that can be made understandable and applicable for the masses and for the public at large and for just the general population. And so within science we have this, within religion we have this, within government we have this. And ultimately, in every instance, if we truly can look at this in a comprehensive fashion, then we will see in the esoteric or the inner plane sense, there are those custodians that do find themselves as the arbiters of this high spiritual components of these fields of endeavor that form different groups and that find themselves, by virtue of their position, as part of a greater group of working out. And so these can sometimes find their correlation in what are known as secret societies and various groups and various amalgamations and syntheses of these workers. And so this is a very real component to consider as well, that they're always going to be the highest mediators for the plan of manifestation for our humanity and for the remainder of our creation and for evolution. And so as these interpreters or these arbiters are doing their work, humanity, by its evolutionary work, is becoming more in tune with these higher spiritual components and the higher aspects and a greater comprehensive knowledge of the unfolding of the plan for evolution. And so as humanity begins to apprehend this more so, and the man on the street becomes more fluent in his ways of understanding, he becomes more fluent in being able to exchange energy and able to really work and apprehend and ascertain these ideas. And so again, this filtering down takes place within all aspects of society. And so we have this component that we can look back to. And what I'm trying to ultimately get this back to is the idea that at the very inception point for our creation, before you can say black and white, before you can say good and bad, before you can say, whatever pairs of opposites you can consider, day and night, hot and cold, all of those things, before any of that stuff actually started, everything was one single spiritual impulse. And it found its way into manifestation and then took on these roles. It took on the roles of the involutionary impulse, the more spiritual natured movings, and it also took on the clothing or the context of what allows us to become material in our nature. And so this is often termed evil. So as a result of this, everything in manifestation is in the process of working out from one common origin, but as we make our way into manifestation, duality becomes our center of awareness, and so we're not able to see things as one complete whole. We're only able to see one component of nature, or not necessarily one component, but a limited aspect of components of nature are all that we're able to understand and ascertain. And then we can begin to find our way back into the path of return. And so this again is just a component of our evolution. Spirit comes into material manifestation to enhance itself, to qualify itself, to invigorate itself through experience. And so as the spiritual component is working its way through the densest matter, as it makes progress through this murky miasma, it takes into itself the little victories and little battles that it's won. And as it gains and is able to be more inclusive and more constructive, and the integrity is there by virtue of these efforts, then we can see how this person can take all of this adversity and turn it into a plus. And so use all of the challenges of the past to become a better person for it. It's kind of along the lines of, if it doesn't kill you, it can only make you stronger. It's very much along the lines of that. That's pretty much could be the theme of our humanity. We're coming into this lifetime, and it ultimately will kill us, but it also will make us stronger. And then we're ready to start again, because I definitely firmly believe in reincarnation. And so this is just one snapshot of a larger unfolding. And this is also where so many individuals tend to limit their comprehension or limit their awareness by only focusing on a one-shot deal, that we have one lifetime to get it right, we have X amount of years, we have 75 years, let's say, roughly speaking, to accomplish something, whatever, and then to find our ultimate reward, our ultimate spiritual reward, our heaven reward, after our afterlife reward, after we've lived a good and proper and virtuous life. This, I think, is a definite difficult task for even the most spiritually minded individual on the planet. And this is why, fortunately, we do have many opportunities and many lifetimes to keep advancing and building from that thread. And so as we take in this light component, as we progress along the path and we build into ourselves some component of light and some greater radiance as well, we become more radiant, and that's another term too. The discovery of radiation as well. And the nuclear, the releasing of the atomic energy also was another great landmark that, along the lines of the discovery of fire, or the discovery of the telescope and the microscope, the discovery of the light bulb or the laser, that the splitting of the atom was a definite benchmark for our unfolding. Because just in the sense that certain material is radioactive, that is a reflection in nature of the person that is more spiritually inclined, because they also have a radiatory capacity. They are radioactive. They are also magnetic in their sphere of influence. And so the person with the Geiger counter can go up to some kind of something that's emitting some radioactivity, and they could be standing pretty far away from it, and it'll be spitting out a pretty good field of influence. And this is very much so what we as humanity have the capability to do also. This is what the great teachers of all ages have done. They have built into themselves this progress, this process and this progress, and they've engendered this into themselves as a way of life, as a fixed habit of thinking and feeling and acting that became something that became automatic to them ultimately. And as this process kicks in and becomes more, again, fixed and just a component of ourselves that becomes automatic, that we don't have to even think about, then our radiatory and our radioactive influence increases. And so we're able to have a greater appeal on the one hand and a greater, again, influence to other individuals. And this is the way that ideas are passed along at one level. This is also the idea behind the cult of personality, that certain people are going to be very charismatic and they're going to have a certain quality or energy about themselves, that they're going to be able to convey or relay something to someone and really be able to draw them in and have this rapport because there's a common energy there that's being accommodated by virtue of this exchange, this rapport. This is when a person is speaking and they're able to have people, attentive to what they're saying, and this is an idea of that relationship and that exchange, and then it builds out from there. And so this is the same with a concept or an idea or an ideology or a trend that would find its way into manifestation, that at some point it filters in and there will be those arbiters of that trend or that new idea, and they'll be exponents of it in their area, and then it will catch on. Another idea of light expansion on the planet is that oftentimes, simultaneously, you'll find people thinking about the same thing on vastly different places on the globe. And this is one aspect of this is certainly with the pyramids from ancient days, that we have them all over the globe, and either these societies were contemporaneous to each other, or they were exchanging at some level, or the idea of the pyramid is an archetypal or internal idea that's part of us that cropped up uniformly in different places around the globe. So that's, I don't know for certain if that's the case either, but it's something to consider when we think about how ideas are finding their way into manifestation and how ideas infiltrate into our thinking. Again, whether that be some mindless trend, some hit song, some pop song that everybody just can't get out of their head, that's just so infectious, or the lyrics that they can't get out of their head or whatever, it's very catchy. These are the things that, again, find a magnetic rapport or a magnetic appeal within humanity. And so as society continues to progress along and evolve, we're going to find ourselves in a position that we will need institutions in place that will allow for further expansions of awareness. Now, certainly we have the education system, we have the university system, we have trade schools, and we have various existing institutes in order to further these ideas along. And certainly there are various think tanks, there are various organizations that address any number of issues under the sun. And this is right and proper, and this is part of our evolution, that there is a group unfolding. This is also is very much in line with the so-called Aquarian influence that's pouring itself into the planet increasingly so, more so and more so at this time. That is also an aspect of light and also an aspect of progress, combining and merging on through our humanity on the physical plane. And so the light of this other star system and this other constellation is finding its way into a place of influence for our humanity and for the planet in general. And so this Aquarian influence of cooperation is allowing for groups to crop up and spread up like weeds for all intents and purposes. There's so many, again, groups being formed or in the process of being formed at all times for all sorts of endeavors. And this is a right and proper aspect of our evolution. And so, again, different groups are going to be moving forward and expressing certain ideas. And so this is going to allow for more light to demonstrate itself on the planet. And there are going to have to be institutions that will be intuitive enough to foresee and to have the vision, the foresight of the next step needed. And this is really where, in my estimation, where the esoteric school comes into play, that those esoteric schools and esoteric institutions and systems of study that are available that allow one to penetrate into one's inner nature, to delve into what makes us tick, and for us to say, man, know thyself, as the Greeks did, for us to get into the occult or the hidden aspects of our humanity. When we can ascertain these things, then we can, again, make further progress and have expanded awareness and have more light, literally on the planet and literally in the spiritual sense, as the light moves through our physical vessels and refines itself. And it finds itself centered in different portions in the body that allow us to, again, take in more information, take in more light, and to understand things in a more thorough fashion. So this is working its way out, and we can see much evidence of this, even in terms like working it through, thinking it out, adding light to a situation, elucidating something. You know, when we speak of these terms, we kind of take them for granted, but really they refer back to a very metaphysical process in which one is taking light and is seizing some aspect of awareness or consciousness and bringing it into manifestation. And so we work it through. We work through from the unseen to the seen, and we bring it down into manifestation. And this again is another component of progress and of light demonstrating itself and manifesting on the planet. This is evolving more so and more so. And so as we're moving towards a transition point where the densest material nature of this planet and the departure point where we can become more light and enlightened is really, really reaching an irritation point, and it's kind of like a fault line. And so as that's manifesting and displaying itself, you're going to see a definite distinction and a definite aligning of polarities in the sense of what is termed good versus evil. And so this is further along the lines of what I'm describing with these institutions that will spring up more so in the future, that you will find those more refined components and segments of humanity seeking this instruction and seeking the means by which to refine themselves to offset this darkness, to offset this material nature, to offset this, and to stabilize the fault line. And so once that equilibrium can be achieved, then some real measures of peace can be in the process of being implemented. And so this is, again, another process of evolutionary unfolding, enlightenment, and the way in which we can work to acknowledge aspects of ourselves and to relegate them to the proper place. We are, in our nature, dual. We have the dark and the light components in us. We have the lower and the higher aspects. And so this is, again, part of this accentuation, the swinging of the energy, like the swinging of the pendulum, to the extreme pole. And so, again, this energy will have to be dealt with, and then as one or the other becomes the dominating energy, as we're right at the fulcrum point in many respects right now, the dominating energy of one or the other is going to start to hold sway. And I certainly see so many indications of the good, the true, and the beautiful on its way in a real fashion. And so these are the things I would hope that people are able to seize and demonstrate, or if not demonstrate, at least see them in the process of demonstrating themselves on the planet, and see that things are on the upswing. Certainly things are very gloomy in many respects, and there's a lot of negativity still. But at this very crucial, pivotal point, it's right and proper that it would be so. It's right and proper that these things would be very evident, and that the choices would be not cut and dried so much, but much more clearly defined and evidenced. And so the choices that we're making are much more informed decisions. So we know so much more. So many things have come to light in recent times that allow for our humanity to make more informed decisions. And so moral relativism is less and less of an excuse, because truth is emerging, and truth is agreed upon by all. There is no such thing as a truth for you, a truth for this person, a truth for this person. Truth is universal. Truth is one and the same. If we can all reach that high summit of agreement upon that which is the highest and the best, and that the spiritual component that is us at our very core, when we reach that understanding and we acknowledge that aspect of ourselves, then we can start to agree upon the truth, the collective truth that we all so many of us seek, increasingly more so and more so. So this is just a part and parcel of it. Again, just the progress of our human unfolding is also the progress of light manifesting itself on the planet. So again, the example of us looking at the globe from space a couple of hundred years ago and seeing that it was kind of dark, and looking at it now and seeing that the globe is very much lit. It's lit with electric light, it's lit with our technology and all the indications of our technological age, but it's also lit with the fires of our souls. It's also lit with the fires of the heart and the fire of the minds of individuals that are seeking expansions of awareness, and that is evidencing itself in addition to the physical plane light. And so those perceiving from space, depending on their level of understanding and comprehension, might just see the lighted globe and the physical plane nature and the technology, or from the more spiritual insight angle, one might truly be able to glean the quality of the heart nature of humanity and assess from that point that the heart of humanity is truly sound, and that we are growing with the fire of the heart, that it is becoming much more radiant and much more vibrant and much more recognizable to other aspects of consciousness outside of our globe. And so we're gaining recognition by our accomplishments. We're gaining more adversity by those that wish to enslave us and hold us back. And we're gaining the observation and the optimism and the encouragement of those that are hoping to see us graduate and to progress along this path of evolution and to enlighten ourselves, to enlighten the globe. Because as we uplift and enlighten ourselves, we're only going to uplift and enlighten the lower kingdoms of nature, enhance and invigorate the kingdoms of nature above the human, and be more inclusive outside of our planetary understanding. And so our Earth can be a real jewel in the solar system, and it can be recognized for the good and the true and the beautiful that is here, and is much more making itself manifest and in evidence and in evidence as time progresses and we do evolve and make strides as humanity. Let me go ahead and grab a couple of calls and see what's going on. Hello, caller, you're on the air. Hello, line 1, you're there?
Corey.
Yeah, how's it going?
Hey, man, it's Matt. I met you last night.
Hey, right on. How's it going?
All right. Yeah, I don't know where to start. This is a pretty big subject. I got a book right here. This guy George Unger wrote on nuclear energy and the occult atom.
Really?
Yeah, it's a transcription of a speech that he gave long time ago, and he talks a lot about a lot of the stuff you're talking about concerning atomic energy and stuff, and the ether, and how these, it's kind of funny. It's like I'm watching you and I'm thinking, I understand what you're talking about on a certain level. A lot of people aren't going to understand any of it, and they're just going to write you off as a kook. I've called into the atheist experience a couple of times, and those guys seem to, their whole perspective is that science to them is, that's what they look to as like why we got here and everything. I think that there's almost like the spiritual or astral plane or whatever you want to call it, the higher dimensions. It's almost like a joke on us in the physical realm, where it's like, you and I know that there's a spiritual nature, and it's a natural thing, and there's certain things that we can perceive that that we know that it's there, but it's like a lot of people just can't see it. Although sometimes they get like glimpses of it. It's like I think it was Carl Sagan that came up with the whole flatland analogy, where it was like if you reduce the dimensions. Like, supposedly we live in 3 dimensions now, but if you reduced them to just 2, and you had, like, some sort of entities that lived in just 2 dimensions, they can't really perceive that 3rd dimension, although they're still living in it. So that when they see things that are coming through that are in the 3rd dimension, they're only going to see, like, if it's just 2-dimensional, it's flat, right? So they're only going to see, like, a sliver of something coming through there. So, and I've heard people say, that explains like ghosts and stuff. But on like progress, what you're talking about, the awakening, this is going on all around us. And I've had this happen in my life recently, where it's like I've been, I got a copy of The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly Hall, and you know, I'm researching all these kind of esoteric groups and stuff, and also tying that into the geopolitical spectrum and what's going on now, and how you know, how we're being deceived and manipulated. And you're talking about like pop culture. They're putting this stuff in our heads, and you know, I was thinking about evolution, and you're talking about like the guy in this book talks about the densification of matter, and how the spirit wills the matter that it's contained in to become other things, to push itself through. And then you look at the point that we're at right now. Supposedly we're like the most evolved, smartest thing on the planet, but it's like, you know, we're almost stuck in this place. And you're right, it's like we're about to break through, and you're talking about like new light and stuff. You know, I don't know if they're used like Freeman's whole thing about using the heart machine to keep everybody's brains kind of in line so that they're not exposed to this stuff.
That's really my firm belief. That's like the real deal thing with HARP and all that. I see that more so, that we're electromagnetic, and if they can send out this jammer device that keeps us from being naturally telepathic, naturally cooperative, naturally in that more, you know, joyful kind of electronic state or electric state that it's our nature, then they can cause more disruption. They can buy themselves more time, and they can hopefully, you know, keep on keeping on. But, you know, that ain't going to happen, and that's just, you know, a desperate attempt, really, in my estimation. So
yeah, because if they shut that thing off for like a week, some weird stuff might start happening. And I've noticed, like, when I was a kid, I had way more psychic energies. I had way more prophetic dreams and stuff, like ESP or what, you know, whatever you want to call it, weird stuff. Also, you're talking about the chemtrails earlier. I think what they might be doing, me and my girlfriend were talking about this right when you were talking about it too, and I think what they might be doing also is they might have stopped it. It might be like an experiment. They might be studying like statistically who's going into the hospitals with what kind of ailments. So they just shut it off for a while to see, like, I don't know how that would play into it, but you know what I mean, like just to see like what effect it is having right now.
I can see that as a potential, because I look at it also as an experimental thing they're working on. You know, it's not I don't think it's a fast science for them. I think they're still trying to get the bugs out and what have you and see how they can manipulate us. So yeah, I can see that there could potentially be other angles, like you're saying, that we don't really know about.
And it might be a budgetary thing too. They might have ran out of
money. I really can't see that. I have thought about that, but I dismiss that so quickly. They print the money. They've got more money. You know what I mean? They can just make more money. They can just divert funds from something. I don't know. They could make it happen if they wanted to. So I really can't factor that in, but I don't know. Maybe.
It'd be great if the pilots just finally, you know, realized what was going on.
Yeah, they would really, but for the number, I mean, the vast reduction that I've noticed in the past week or so, they would really have a lot of them would have had to have simultaneously said, hey, I don't think so. So that's a great, you know, to be really optimistic, that would be great to think about it in those terms. I don't know, you know, that would be nice. That really would. So who's to say, man? I don't know.
I'll let you get a couple more calls, man, later.
Hey, I really appreciate that. Thanks a lot also for coming out to the meeting last night. Good to meet you guys in person. And again, I really have to give credit to the Jack Blood forums. It seems like, man, he really does have some lively forums. I don't have a computer at this very second. I had a computer, and then it went bust, and so I'm hopefully in the process of getting another hand-me-down computer. So as quickly as possible, I'll try to get back on and jump on those forums and see what's going on there. So yeah, it's a good thing. And again, I thank everybody from the Jack Blood forums that made their way out to our metaphysical and philosophical meeting last night. Very lively discussion and a lot of informed people. This last caller, is also part of the aspect of progress that I want to discuss as well. So many people in the so-called patriot movement or this truth-seeking movement are making much inroads on their own. A lot of this information is shared, and there's a lot of common ideas among the patriot community with, let's say, you know, 911 was an inside job, Oklahoma City was an inside job, things of this nature, knowing about the Fed or the IRS. You know, there's a lot of common knowledge that there's a common ground there. Then you've got all these individual people, because of technology with editing equipment and video cameras and the internet, that people are compiling things and putting them out there for folks. And you've got, like, the Freeman perspective, for instance, and you've got just patriot type folks and just regular folks that, because, you know, the home editing equipment is so inexpensive, relatively speaking, and the technology is there for us to make use of, that you know, Joe Blow in his basement can make a really cool 911 video, or just a, you know, a parapolitical statement, or can print up some really neat stuff, can get into Photoshop and manipulate something really cool, or what have you. And the technology is there. Again, another dual-edged sword that, you know, these things can be used to manipulate us and enslave us, or they can be used for the betterment of humanity. And I really see innovative people, and again with the micro FM transmitters, I think that's another wonderful example of people just doing something relatively inexpensive, relatively simple, all things considered, and having a really profound effect. This I see as just a small example of what's yet to unfold itself further. I think here in Austin we have a real opportunity to be trendsetters and to catch the tip of the wave and show the example for other people to follow. And certainly there are other pockets of people in other places that are doing their own thing and setting, you know, being trailblazers and setting examples in their areas of endeavor. There's a lot going on. This is definitely, I would say, not the time to sit by idly and just let things be. This is a time when we have the knowledge at our disposal and we have the tools at our disposal, and there are plenty of opportunities for people to get involved with something. To say, oh, I can't find anything to do to make a difference, then one is certainly not looking, in my estimation. There's so much out there right now that is available to people that they could take advantage of, and I highly, highly encourage people to look around, get your head out of the sand. You know, if you don't want to break bread with your neighbors or something like that, do what you can do in order to find some like-minded people and to cooperate and exchange. This is one way that we can do a lot. The powers that be can't really manipulate or can't really monitor transmission from people if they meet in small groups and they meet randomly, and they, you know, just things like that are not going to, they're going to be below the radar. And if enough of this stuff is fomenting underneath the radar, then before too long it's going to bubble up to the surface in little bubbles and pockets of, you know, toil, or double toil and trouble, whatever you want to call it. So it's definitely trouble for those that wish to enslave us, because the amounts of people. Now certainly you've got influential people, as I spoke of earlier, that have that radiatory capacity. When you get a celebrity or something like that that jumps up and says, hey, you know, this is how it is, and really draws attention to the situation. Or you get a political figure that's going to be starting to feel a certain way, like maybe a Paul Wellstone. They have to be dealt with at a certain level. But again, you'll find these people that have an influential capacity, and then you'll find people that are just more, you know, Joe Citizen, that feel empowered and compelled to do something. And I think when those two forces meet, those that are really influential and those that are just working, you know, behind the scenes, and those energies and efforts merge, we're going to see a real shift. We're right on the verge of it. We're right on the point of teetering over to something really promising and a point of optimism, I feel, for the future. So that's something I'd like to consider. I want to remind folks we are here every Thursday, Channel 11, 8 p.m. Folks can check out Therefore I Am every Tuesday, 10 p.m., Channel 16. Beautiful Losers is tonight, 10 p.m., Channel 16. Freeman Perspective, Sunday night, 12 p.m., Channel 16. I want to thank my producer, Chris, for commanding the helm of the Starship Esoterica. I want to thank all the folks that took the time and trouble to view this evening, the folks that came out to the Metaphysical and Philosophical meeting. We should have some pretty good guests coming up in the next few weeks, so I encourage people to stay tuned. Take care, Austin, and have a nice evening, and we'll see you soon.